Good morning
Hi,
and welcome.
good morning. Always my pleasure.
All
So,
right.
yeah.
So as I said in my prelude, there's a number of persons on all the sides of the political spectrum saying that though this is a good thing, this may not be the best time for such an implementation. What are you thinking, or what are the views of the National Transformation Alliance?
Well, firstly, good morning again. I think this must not be seen as something as to bash the SRC or the SRC being insensitive based on the present economic climate. The SRC, they have a job to do, and maybe the SRC are actually analyzing, doing a comparative analysis of other countries, looking at what usually happens, that they believe it is justified. And so this must not be seen in any way that the SRC would have done something wrong or they were just acting as political puppets to the government. That is unacceptable. The second thing is we would have heard persons such as Dr. Terence Farrell and others try to justify it by stating that it can be afforded. And it could very well be the situation. So that is definitely not the reason for us to have any debate. It's not whether it is the country could afford it or not. It has to do with whether it should happen. So let's not look to bash the SRC. Let's not speak about the fact that the country cannot afford it. Yes, the country can afford it, and yes, the SRC would have probably done their job and done it well. I think what is unacceptable is for the Prime Minister to try to state that the justification for this is because hearing him state now that the judiciary, the Chief Justice, and others would have taken the state to court if it is that it was blocked. So it means that you're stating that a cabinet and a government would make decisions based on your fear that you will go to court. Going to court is based on whether you did something that is right or wrong. So it should not be based on you trying to use the judiciary to say that the judiciary would have taken us to court and the SRC would have been the persons having to answer. And no, that is not the case. If you are the government and you reject it, there's nothing that the judiciary could have done because it meant that the SRC would have submitted what was required, and then you, as the government and the opposition, would have unanimously stated that we do not accept it at this time. So let's not try to pass the buck and throw persons under the bus and try to blame the judiciary for threats of taking the state to court, because that's a new excuse to justify this. As it pertains to leadership, that I think that is the difference with the NTA, where I would stand. In a situation like this, it is true. Whereas it can be afforded, we have to look at the climate in this country. And again, it is because of my training as a military officer, we have been trained not to do anything that we will not allow others under our command to do themselves. So if it is, we have a situation where the vast majority of the country, they are suffering. People do not know where their next meal is coming from. People cannot afford to pay their mortgage. People are suffering to try to get their taxi fare to get their children to school, to pay for school fees, to try to deal with the basic day-to-day living in the country. You're struggling to get even 4% for the public sector, but you are part of the public sector, and it is okay for you to get a hike to the point that it could be about 5 or 6 times the salary of other persons. So that is the point. It has to do again with leadership by example. I could go back to myself when I was commissioner of police just before, because of me being a contracted commissioner of police. The only time that was done before would have been Dwayne Gibbs, and a precedent was set, and he was getting $140,000 a month. So it meant
Wow.
that based on me also being contracted, it gave me the opportunity to also make that similar claim. And I thought it would be irresponsible of me going as a commissioner of police, knowing what the present situation was for other police officers, for me to have a salary like that. I decided to have the same salary as the regular commissioners of police, which was really not practical because when they leave, they have a pension, they have gratuity, they have all of that. You don't get it as a contracted person, which is why contracted persons get much more. And I decided to take 100,000 less per month for 3 years, which is over $3.6 million. And that is the type of leadership that the country needs. There's someone where it is you can state that I am prepared to go through the same consequences and frustration that the others under my command will do. And I think that is what is more important, that it should be seen along that line that the present economic climate, it is being seen of that item where you're in that these lofty towers and you're having your feast and you're asking everyone else downstairs to eat cake.
Do you think that this would impact the public's opinion of this administration come this general election?
Unfortunately, yes. And the reason I say unfortunately is that we have a way of just holding on to one specific thing rather than look at what would have taken place over a 5-year period. That should not be the avenue to justify whether you will vote for a government or not. We recall that is what probably happened in 2010 over a $2 million flag, and that became a big thing. And that $2 million flag was a drop in the bucket as it pertained to the incompetence and the bad decision-making process by the government at that time. That flag was just one aspect of it. So this year should not be seen as the be all and end all. What should be seen is how it is that you handle the economy, how you handle national security, health, education, social development, tourism, sports and culture, all of these things. If it is that you're just trying to home in on this as the avenue, it means that you are totally been you've seen everything else that was done, good, bad, or indifferent, by the government and the opposition and other political parties as being irrelevant. I am asking persons, sit down and take a broad perspective and look at what it is that the government may have done, not done, achieved, not achieved. Same thing with the opposition, other political parties opposed to the, and see if they have the policies, the principles, the priorities, the political will, and the right people to make Trinidad and Tobago grow the country that it should be. Holding on to this one element to decide whether you should vote for a government or not, I think that is rather small-minded. I mean, it should be something that you should consider because it shows that the government is not in sync to analyze what is happening with the average man downstairs. And when that happens, that is when you will lose focus. It goes back to leadership by example. I spend most of my time being on the ground, not in the 6th floor of the police admin building, not in the 5th floor in the Ministry of National Security. You got to be on the ground and understand what people go through. And when you do that, that decision to say, well, we will accept it because the SRC made the recommendation would not have taken place.
Okay. And with all the economic issues that we're seeing happening, we're seeing that there's a continued issue in accessing Forex currency, especially for small and medium enterprises. Where do you think the priority should be for this government in a time like this?
Putting a lot of focus and emphasis in trying to see if you could help the small businessman, because that situation with Forex is not a matter of great concern for the large conglomerates who have the capability, the accessibility because of their accounts and so forth in North America. This is crippling the economy. It is crippling the small businessman who is pleading and looking for some avenue to try to get goods and services to continue his or her business. And even if as it pertains to even persons traveling abroad, why would you want to travel abroad on a vacation when you could get 200 US? Where are you going with that? What are you doing with it? So it has totally been a situation where I don't think that the interest has been put in place to understand the grave nature of it. It is going to obviously be a byproduct towards inflation, the increase in cost of goods and services, possible unemployment, businesses shutting down, because that crippling effect of that inability to get proper Forex in a proper manner, in a manner that is worthy to ensure that business can boom and build and develop and multiply, it is going to have just the opposite. And that opposite effect is going to be a byproduct, as I said, of unemployment, inflation, increasing the cost of goods and services, and obviously it is going to, which again becomes a byproduct to increase crime.
Right. And even with this, should businesses now be advocating for the governments to take this Forex situation more seriously, especially as we're moving towards this general election?
Yes, they would, that they should, but they would not. When you look at a situation in this country that a president failed to adhere to the law, Paula Mayweeks in some other countries would have probably been investigated. You failed to adhere to the law, and you didn't do what was required, and it caused, and then you have a situation with a meritless being moved, and that again in a period where it was the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 years. Public trust and confidence in the police was 59%. The country felt safe, which again was a byproduct towards more investment, people feeling safer, people spending more money. And every single businessman said nothing. They all stayed quiet. You know why? Affect their business with the public sector, with the state. So that's also when you listen to Gregory Aboud and all of them crying these crocodile tears now about crime and what is being done. You stayed silent. You stayed silent because it may have affected you. The only businessman that stood up and was concerned about it was Peter George. The rest of them, that is how we work in this country. Let me say nothing because it might affect me in getting my contracts with these. businesses, all of them, they will say nothing because they're afraid that it will affect their investment and their opportunity to get contracts with the same state. But then they will be coming to me, whispering, complaining. Don't come to me and complain. Come forward. Let the public know that what the government is doing is unacceptable. You've got to find a solution. You have to put this as priority. But again, all of these chambers who all stayed silent, every single one of them, they were calling me, thanking me for providing firearms for them and their businesses and all and the different persons, but never wanting to open their mouth to voice their concern about the stupidity that was being stated by the government as it pertained to the same firearm issue. So it's okay, give me what I needed because it was the right thing. I thank you for it, but I'm not going to make an doing this inappropriate because it will affect my business. So the same thing is happening now. No businessman is going to openly come forward and make that statement. So they will stay quiet, and by silence, it can be seen and perceived by the business sector, the chambers, and the government can go ahead and do what they're doing whilst the economy is continuing to collapse.
Now, we hear a lot about what's happening in preparation for this upcoming general election. We even hear here in Tobago, the political leader of the Tobago People's Party, Farley Augustine, saying that they're now screening candidates for that election. How are things going at the NTA in preparation for the next general election?
Well, we are up and running. I think we political party to commence the screening. As it is right now, we have confirmed 3 candidates. That is being myself, Gary Griffith, for the constituency of St. Joseph, Lieutenant Commander Norman Dindial for the constituency of Chaguanas East, and Dr. Kevin Saran for the constituency of San Fernando West. Usually, who wins San Fernando West and St. Joseph wins the election. It is as technical, tactical, and strategic as that. We have other persons who have been custodians, and very soon they will very well be appointed as candidates. So that will be inclusive of very critical constituencies of Sama Barataria, Lopino, also Arima, La Hoquita Talparo, Sagre Grande, Tunapuna, so and Moruga. So we know exactly what we are doing. We are going to put a lot of focus on the marginal constituencies. We also have custodian / future candidates for 2 of the 3 Diego Martin seats, one in Port of Spain, as well one in Point and other seats. So we have continued to do what we are doing. The interesting thing about it is that as soon as persons jump with that old song, that old road march, that as a third party you cannot win and you're going to split the votes. I've never heard anything in my life of a vote being split. To say that you're splitting the vote means that you're disrespecting that citizen by stating that you believe that vote belonged to somebody other than the PNM. It doesn't work that way. That is disrespect to the citizen. It is disrespect to persons who are under the age of 35 who never had a third choice since 2007 when the Congress of the People was there. It is disrespect to the Constitution and what it stands for. It is disrespect to democracy. So our job is to look for and to provide that degree of representation for those persons, whether you call us the knife and fork, the floating voters, the independent voters, the voters who are not PNM till they're dead, or are born at UNC and have die at UNC, which is the right of those 200,000 persons at both sides. But there are 100 to 150,000 persons that will always gravitate towards a third party because they're looking for a better option, not in any. And these are the 2 major political parties have done. The important part about this whole thing again is that what that bridge constituency, what that third party will do, always decides the outcome of the general election. That is fact. Whether you like it or not, whether you like Gary Griffith or not, that is irrelevant. In 1981, the ONR, they went on their own. They got 91,000 votes, and it caused the PNM to win by a larger margin. In 1986, the ONR joined with the ULF. It caused the annihilation of the PNM. In 1991, the NAR broke away on their own, split with the UNC. Kamala Prasad Bisesa, by the way, was part of the NAR, where it caused the PNM to get back in government. 1995, Basil Pandit joined with A.N.R. Robinson's 2 seat to become prime minister. In 2001, Ramesh Maharaj got 188 votes in Tunapuna, 188, and it caused a 1961 to turn to an 1818 and caused a government to collapse and be removed because of one third party getting 188 votes. In 2007, the Congress of the People acquired 147,000 votes, and it caused the PNM to win 26 to 15. And in 2010, the Congress of the People joining with the UNC caused the annihilation of the PNM. End result, it is there. The UNC has never won an election on its own in a three-horse race in 36 years. The only time they ever won was in 2000, and that lasted a few months, and that was because they did not have a third party. So in summary, what we do, how we operate, is going to dictate the direction and the results of the upcoming general election.
Right, and the political landscape is shifting a bit. We're seeing persons entering, some persons re-entering, like the MP for Tobago, Weshamford Joe, indicating that she is putting herself forward for re-election. And we're seeing persons like Fitzgerald Hines saying that he is not going to be representing his community again in the upcoming election, and hearing members of his constituency saying that, well, they're happy because he was a bit out of touch. Now, the Prime Minister confirmed this last week in his press briefing that he would not be putting himself up for re-election, but he may continue to be around in the party. How are you feeling about his decision to step down?
Well, I've heard some people mention it was the end of an era. I don't think so. I think it was the end of an era. So it wasn't the end of an era, it was the end of an era, the end of the biggest era. I think Fitzgerald Hines, unfortunately, the most ineffective, the most incompetent minister in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And it goes right back to the point with the SRC, with funding. You give individuals as members of parliament 50, 60, 70,000. Look, some of them, they are not qualified in anything as it pertains to the field that they're in. So you have persons who may be very well trained in energy, very well trained in national security, and you are put.
We're having.
And so because of that, now these individuals get a salary with no qualification, no experience, no training, no track record in a ministry that you are supposed to govern with billions of dollars. And then on top of that, we are giving you an increase. So you are giving people an increase in pay without measuring their performance, making them accountable, ascertaining whether they have done. It is only in politics that happens. In the private sector, you can't get an increase because of the post that you hold. You get an increase based on how you have performed. And we don't see that. So unfortunately, persons like Fitzgerald Hines and others would continue. After Hines, there are going to be others who would not have the capability, the performance to lead anything. But they will be given a ministry. You know why? Because they were somebody who will be screaming on a platform, and you have to give them a seat. And by giving them a seat, you have to give them a ministry to make sure they across the floor. This is what affects politics in this country. What the NTU intend to do, I do not want yes people. I do not want non-performers. I do not want persons who may just be loyal to Gary Griffith, that everything that I say you're going to agree to. That is why when you look at this person like Dr. Kevin Saran, one of the youngest surgeons that we have, probably one of the most popular persons in social media, someone who's articulate. When you look at him and compare to other candidates, when you look at Commander Norman Dindale, this is a man who actually has trained serving his country, going to other parts of the world to try to ensure democracy is restored. And you compare that to his competitors, myself as a previous Minister of National Security, Commissioner of Police, safe again. What we are going to do is to show the standard of the individuals. So people like Fitzgerald Hines will come and go, but other Hines are going to replace him. I think that is where political parties must start trying to find persons who are not yes people, but persons who have the capability, the confidence, the emotional intelligence, the education, and the charisma to be able to serve a country, respect citizens, and do what is required based on your qualification, not based on the party card you had in your back pocket. Fitzgerald Hines has benefited from it because of his party card, not because he ever had the capability to lead.
And do you think that persons are ready to shift the pattern of voting from the traditional or cultural means of voting for one of the two top parties and to begin voting for competent leadership?
It's not going to happen. The political leader of the PNM or UNC could go down and shoot persons in cold blood, and 200,000 persons will still try to justify it and vote for them. That is the norm. That is how people think. You could actually look at it even in the United States, where it is regardless of what, you're going to get 70 odd million persons on both sides, regardless of what the leader will do, they're still going to blindly vote for them, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. Trinidad and Tobago is no different. So this perception that we feel that people hate the PNM, it ain't going to happen. The PNM have already started with 200,000 votes in their bank. That's not going to move. Same thing with the UNC. Thankfully, that rich constituency, it continues to increase. As I said, it was 91,000 in 1981 with the ONR. It then moved to 127,000 in 1990. Prasad Bissessar was part of. It then moved to 147,000 in 2007 under the Congress of the People. So 17 years later, it may very well be more. But even if you put that in half, you take that 100,000, divide by 41, those 2,500 votes that we would get would always determine the outcome and the result of the general election. So unfortunately, we do not have proportional representation that will give us that degree of representation with our 100,000 to 150,000 independent voters. But what they decide, what you decide, those independent voters decides the outcome of the election. So I think that is more important than that base support.
Right, and we're going to take a break very soon. But before we get to the break, I want to ask you, what do you think are some of the pivotal topics or issues in this upcoming general election that are going to swing or sway the votes of the undecided voters?
Just two things. It's similar to the US election, national security and the economy. Those are the determining factors that the average person who is suffering, many persons in small business, they're fighting up, trying to struggle to make as much funds as possible to sell their business, to move out. If they see that there's a political leader or a political party that has the confidence and the ability and the political will to transform Trinidad and Tobago to make it safe again, if they have the ability to make the deciding that can transform our economy and make this a better place, that is what they're going to do. We are not going to see the major political parties try to be involved in a campaign like that, because when it pertains to national security, I will challenge any of the major debate with Gary Griffith as to what are your plans, your policies, your programs, your units, your technology that you intend to do to make Trinidad and Tobago safe again. They can't do it. As the Minister of National Security, it was the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years. During my period at the not under the UNC, under Gary Griffith was the minister, because before that, you didn't have that. Similar with my Commissioner of Police, it was the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 years. Public trust and confidence in the police service was 59%. National security concern, safety and security became the number 4 concern under my watch, behind health, education, and the economy. That is what the floating voters are going to look for. What is going to make it lessen the possibility of my daughter being kidnapped, my son being killed? That is what they're going to look at. And then obviously the economy. Are you going to find other situations for us to find income rather than just belt tightening and finding ways to increase taxes? If they're looking at policies, they're going to be looking at the people, they're going to be looking at ethics. That is the determining factor for that 100 to 150,000 floating voters. And that is where the National Transformation Alliance will provide that representation.
In your capacity as former police commissioner, on some of the arrests that we've seen happening and some of the cases, increased number of cases among police officers, what are some of your views on this situation?
Again, it is unfortunate that when we try to politicize national security, within 2 months when I was Commissioner of Police, a scathing letter from the Police Service Commission buffing me because of the mass number of police officers being absent in court. And it meant that many persons who should be incarcerated, they were getting back out onto the streets to be involved in white-collar crime, murder, grievous body. So that was a major factor that caused crime to continue, because the criminal elements knew that crime being a product of opportunity, I could commit the crime, get apprehended, and there's a 90 to 95% chance when I go to court, the police officers will either not be there or they will not be qualified and trained enough to be able to withstand the scrutiny and challenge of my qualified defense attorneys who would be able to. That became a letter that they sent to me, and I said, "But poor me, I mean, I just became commissioner. This is something that I inherited based on failures by commissioners before me for decades not to deal with the problem." So immediately I'm having lays with and others. We looked at, and I looked at international best practice, and we put 3 systems in place to put an end to that. One was to bring in civilian attorneys who would be more qualified, better trained than the average police officer with a first degree and lower, who actually believes that he is qualified to represent the state against hardened, seasoned defense attorneys of those persons who have been charged. And by doing that, they were able to package case management, prosecutorial, so that they can have a proper case management package, that as a prosecutor, that when they go to court, they can be able to win the case. And we started seeing an increase in the percentage of cases being won because of that, bringing in those civilian attorneys who had the capability to be able to match the defense attorneys. The second was to make sure that we had backup police officers in case the police officer who was supposed to be the main prosecutor will be able to, in case that person is absent based on death, sickness, resignation, absenteeism, vacation, or even being a rogue element and being paid off by the criminal elements, you had the backup officer. So it a situation where the officer, when there will be an absence of police presence as the prosecutor. And the third was systems to measure their performance and make them accountable. In other words, every week, then recently deceased ACP Prague, who was excellent in trying to transform the problem of police absenteeism in court and making us win cases, he will give me a list of officers who will be absent, and then disciplinary action will be taken. So once officers understood that there were consequences, they will not be absent from court. Those three things caused a massive turnaround in the problem that we had. In fact, the Police Service Commission 1 year later then sent a commendation to me on behalf of the police service, where every one of the 9 then divisions, to the point of over 90% in reduction in police absenteeism. That is what played the major part, or one of the major parts, towards the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 years, because the criminal elements realize now that there's a good chance they would be apprehended and they would be incarcerated. And with that, now it prevented them from committing the crime, because now there was a deterrent. The product of opportunity will no longer be there. But also, when charged, we will go through the whole criminal justice system to ensure that you could not get out of jail. All of these things, Earl Christopher and Old MacDonald Jacob decided to remove, taking away the backup police officer and taking away disciplinary action. Because of that, the criminal elements have realized yet again, I could commit the crime and there will be no officers there, or the officers will be on the take. There will be a poor case management system. That is what is required. I think it is rather unfortunate that the country is applauding bad management based on a knee-jerk system of what they're trying to do to rectify the situation by relaying the charges. It is similar to somebody who is intoxicated. You bump somebody, but you put the person in the car to take them to the hospital, and everybody applauds the person for being a good Samaritan. You caused the accident in the first place by removing the systems that would have prevented the case having been dropped in the first place. And now by you relaying the charges, I ask the country to understand that this is only taking place because it is a high profile, but there have been hundreds and hundreds of situations where criminal elements who should be incarcerated were freed, and persons did not get justice, whether being raped, kidnapped, robbed, because the police did not do their job. We have situations of domestic violence now where police officers will not be attending court, and the victim is now going to, and the person who committed the crime is getting out smiling. So we are being pleased about this one incident because it is high profile. Hundreds of cases have flopped because of the lack of the political will of persons keeping systems that worked. Yes. What is required is for us to look at what worked, never be political, and this matter would not have taken place. So what we intend to do is to reignite those 3 policies that I put in place to ensure that what we would have seen 3 years ago, which is over 83 to 91% reduction in police absenteeism in court, would take place yet again, and to make sure we have a proper prosecution, to do proper case file management to win those cases in court.
Excellent. Again, we want to thank you for your time this morning. Guys,